There was a time when burning rubber and twisted steel weren't just the byproducts of speed, they were the language of war. The vehicular combat genre, once a staple of the late 90s and early 20s, invited players into arenas where survival hinged not on precision driving but on sheer brutality. Today the genre idles quietly, its engines silenced by changing tastes and shifting trends, but the memories remain of oil-slick streets, rusted dead machines, and the frenzied chaos of games like Twisted Metal and Burnout. For many, these titles defined an era of reckless abandon, but some stories slipped through the cracks. One such tale belongs to RoadKill, a game that never climbed the genre's highest podiums. This is the tragic story of RoadKill, an overlooked relic from terminal reality. With the rise of 3D graphics in the late 90s, vehicular combat roared into the mainstream. Titles like Carmageddon, Vigilante 8, Rogue Trip Vacation 2012, and most notably Twisted Metal carved out a niche defined by mayhem, speed, and destruction. Among them, Twisted Metal Black would go on to become a genre-defining entry. Its grim tone, refined mechanics, and brutal arenas still praised as the high watermark of car-based combat. The game's influence was immediate and inescapable. Studios rushed to replicate its success, flooding the market with imitators that borrowed its style but seldom captured its soul. One by one, these clones drifted into obscurity. Midway Games and Terminal Reality, however, saw the writing on the wall. Simply mimicking the formula would only lead them to comparisons they couldn't win. Instead, they aimed to evolve the genre, to expand on what had come before rather than echo it. At least, that was the plan initially. Before RoadKill took shape, it bore a different name, Highway Hunter. In its earliest stages, the project was envisioned as an ambitious 3D vehicular combat game that drew not only from Twisted Metal but also from Grand Theft Auto, Driver, and other influences. While digging through early design materials, I came across a concept document dated March 4, 2002, one that offers a rare glimpse into RoadKill's original vision. What it reveals is a game that is both recognizable and surprisingly different from the version that would eventually be released. Society in this early draft had completely collapsed. Nuclear fire had scorched the earth, birthing a savage world where morality had no place. Civilization was little more than a memory. The strong preyed on the weak. Laws were myths, and survival had become a brutal competition. It was a haven for the wicked and a nightmare for anyone left with a conscience. As we read further into the document, one of the most notable differences was the protagonist. Rather than the grizzled Mason Strong featured in the final release, players would have stepped into the boots of Carson Gunn, leader of a rugged crew navigating the outskirts of New Canaan. Their mission wasn't just survival, they were scavengers, mercenaries, and reluctant protectors, offering aid to passing pilgrims and weak survivors for a price. Gunn wasn't a hero in the traditional sense, just a man surviving a world where goodness had become a luxury few could afford. The main story, however, didn't differ much from RoadKill. Both Mason Strong and Carson Gunn were out for revenge, but the way it all started in Highway Hunter was slightly different. From the design document we can read the following. Gunn and his crew work as mercenaries in a post-apocalyptic world, forming a working relationship with Major Anspa, the city guard chief of New Canaan. They're paid to escort mysterious pilgrims who carry strange mechanical parts marked with a winged logo. While raiding an old military base, Gunn finds another part with the same symbol and gives it to his close friend Lo Pro for safekeeping. But when they deliver more pilgrims, New Canaan's guards suddenly turn on them, killing Lo Pro, most of the crew and the pilgrims. Anspa steals the winged part and vanishes behind the city gates. Enraged, Gunn teams up with a vengeful pilgrim girl and the few surviving members of his crew. They set out to infiltrate New Canaan, uncovering that the city is run by insane, tyrannical rulers who enslave outsiders and seek to collect all the winged parts. Their goal? To gain control of deadly war satellites in orbit and rule the post-apocalyptic world. Now Gunn is out for revenge and total destruction, ready to bring the city down, one villain at a time. As the design document unfolds, it becomes clear that RoadKill was originally envisioned on a much grander scale. Numerous gameplay features were proposed, many of which never made it into the final product. True to its post-apocalyptic setting, the early pitch painted a world gripped by instability. Natural disasters and environmental hazards were meant to play a central role. Tornadoes, hailstorms, lightning strikes, dust storms, radiation zones, and toxic pools were all listed among the game's dynamic threats. Of these, only tornadoes would survive the transition from concept to execution. Further into the document, we find even more ambitious ideas, mechanics that would have brought the world to life in striking ways. Buildings weren't just dressing, they were meant to decay over time, crumbling as the player passed through once proud cities, now succumbing to the elements. Environmental damage would be visible and persistent, reflecting the gradual collapse of civilization. Urban areas too were imagined as interactive and reactive, alive with activity and consequence. The final game, however, offers none of this. The cities feel static and hollow, lacking the dynamism originally imagined. Much of what was envisioned simply didn't materialize. Given RoadKill's clear inspiration from games like Driver and Grand Theft Auto, it is no surprise that a car hijacking system was part of the early design. Players wouldn't just be able to steal vehicles on the fly. Enemy gangs could do the same, pulling the player from their car and taking it for themselves. And hear this, the early concept for RoadKill, then still known as Highway Hunter, also drew inspiration from the Warriors. A proposed command and recruitment system would have allowed players to assemble a crew, issuing orders such as attack, defend, follow, or hold position. It introduced a layer of tactical control that would have set the game apart from its contemporaries. But like many of the pitch's more ambitious features, this system never made it past the planning stage. Looking back at the original document, it's clear that Highway Hunter was a vastly different game from RoadKill. In many ways, it was an entirely different vision altogether. It's just a shame that we never got to see it in full, only glimpses of it from this design document. Eventually, Highway Hunter was shelved for mysterious reasons. Highway Hunter was out and RoadKill was in.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Just when the concept seemed ready to disappear, it was resurrected under a new name, RoadKill, and from there, the game began to take form. From the very beginning, whether it was called Highway Hunter or the RoadKill we know today. The goal was to make a great vehicular combat, not just rinse and repeat what had been done before. At least, that was the initial idea. Producer Jeremy Erie had grown tired of the endless wave of generic street racers flooding the market. When Twisted Metal Black roared into the scene, it was a revelation, brutal, intense, and utterly unmatched. Erie took note, and then he took action. I am a huge fan of vehicle combat and was bored to death of the street racing games that were out there. They missed the core element of action that great games like Twisted Metal had. I didn't, however, want to make an arena-based combat game. I wanted more. He understood what many others didn't. Twisted Metal Black was a behemoth that left behind a void, one no other game dared to fill. With Twisted Metal Black, no other games came to play in their backyard. It left a void. I wanted to fill that void with a living, breathing world. I wanted role-playing elements. I wanted missions. That's where RoadKill was born. Of course, such ambition didn't come out of nowhere. To stand apart from the giants of the genre, Erie and the team at Midway Games envisioned a unique blend. The vehicular carnage of Twisted Metal, the freedom of GTA, and the tight, responsive driving of Driver. But games weren't the only inspiration. We are really products of our environment. We grew up with great movies like Death Race 2000, Road Warrior, Mad Max, Escape from New York, and Blade Runner. We loved movies like Full Metal Jacket and Platoon. This deep love for all things vehicular and chaotic became the fuel behind RoadKill, a game that wouldn't settle for walking in Twisted Metal's shadow. At the time, there was a big hole in vehicular combat. We couldn't be another Twisted Metal, we had to do something more. It is worth pointing out that RoadKill wasn't built by Midway alone. While Jeremy Erie might have sparked the original idea, the game was co-developed alongside Terminal Reality, the same crew behind Blood Rain. Their infernal engine gave RoadKill its guts and would later be used in their second and final collaboration with Midway, Spy Hunter Nowhere to Run. Erie didn't choose Terminal Reality by chance. According to him, their tech was exactly what the game needed, a solid engine to fuel a chaotic, war-torn world that never stopped moving. In the months leading up to its release, RoadKill was promoted under the tagline, the only mission-based combat driving game set in a post-apocalyptic world. It was a bold claim, one that hinted at ambition and uniqueness within a genre that had already begun to lose momentum. Yet despite its potential, RoadKill slipped quietly under the radar. The reason was the lackluster marketing. Midway's promotional efforts during the PlayStation 2 era were notoriously poor, often leaving even their most promising titles without the visibility they needed to succeed. RoadKill wasn't the only victim of this oversight. Games like Psyops The Mindgate Conspiracy and Gauntlet 7 Sorrows, both appreciated and mechanically solid, suffered similar fates, praised by those who found them but largely ignored by the mainstream. By the time audiences began to take notice, it was already too late. Aside from a handful of print advertisements and a couple of TV commercials, RoadKill arrived with barely a whisper. So, did RoadKill deliver on its promise to inject fresh blood into the withering veins of the vehicular combat genre? Not quite. Within days of release, the game was written off by much of the mainstream press as little more than a GTA copy with extra rust and rocket launchers. It wasn't a disaster by any means, but it certainly didn't roar across the finish line as intended. And yet, something strange happened in the wreckage. While critics scoffed, fans of the Twisted Metal held a different perception. They saw past the grim and into the spark it carried. Truth be told, Highway Hunter in all its raw uncut ambition felt like a very different beast. One with fangs, one with fire. It hinted at a game that wanted to tear up the tarmac, rather than just follow the track. What changed? Where did that fire go? Whatever happened behind closed doors will remain locked away. Like many edgy misfits of its era, RoadKill crashed and burned, both in sales and critical reception. It doesn't take a crystal ball to figure out that a sequel was never on the cards. Just to be sure, I tried reaching out to the original developers hoping for some closure. Unfortunately, I heard nothing back. But fate has a funny way of answering questions when you least expect it. While digging through old gameplay videos of RoadKill on YouTube, I stumbled upon a surprising find. A comment from one of the radio hosts. Buried in the replies was a straightforward answer to the question that hovered like a smog over the wreckage. Was RoadKill 2 ever in the works?
I'd like to begin with a fact. A simple yet shocking fact. It is this.
When Midway Games met its grim fate, Warner Bros. Swooped in and claimed most of its IPs, Mortal Kombat being the crown jewel. But RoadKill, that one quietly slipped away. However, Terminal Reality, the studio behind the game's tech and co-development, managed to snag the rights before the lights went out. Whether RoadKill will ever get the Blood Rain style revival treatment by a company like Ziggurat Interactive remains a mystery.
No one's responsible. Put your hand on